So, we can again really think about utilizing this weekend well and setting a good motivation for really thinking about our death and the condition of existence and how everything is constantly changing and in flux, that nothing stays the same. So to kind of shake ourselves out of this reticence and amnesia, as Venerable was saying last night, like an amnesia that we don't think about the fact that this is what happens at the end of our life. So how many of you are afraid of dying? Okay, how many of you are not afraid? I guess I would vote like this. Yeah. Yeah. So for myself, I've just completed my 4th year as a hospice chaplain at Torrance Memorial Medical Center. Our offices are at the hospital, but we work with people who have chosen to enter hospice and reside in their own homes or in nursing homes or board and care centers. So I'm really not in the hospital at all, just very rarely when someone's entering hospice. Kind of like in the film that you watched last night, someone is given the decision, to make of what they want to do. But I thought it was really poignant, in especially that one man where everybody's kind of hovering over his bed, and it's like all the medical people are there, and they say to him, "Are you tired of this? Tell us what you want." It was very powerful to me. And where was the spiritual support? It was just the total medical model there. And now it is a rule in hospitals across the U.S. where they have to have spiritual care support and social worker. Now, it's possible that the person had denied it. That's always your choice too. And many, many people say they don't want it. And so it's like putting all your eggs in one basket, saying, I just want the docs to cure me. And many physicians make that choice to just, it's all about cure. It's all about cure and relieving suffering. They call that relieving suffering. In our Dharma practice, we talk about relieving suffering as well. And I must make that clarification with my work as chaplain, that I am not knowledgeable in the medical aspect of it all. Sometimes people ask me, and I have to just decline, because it is not my area of expertise, nor do I have any. And so it makes me continually focus on the heart. What's going on here, especially at this very crucial point of time. So there's a physician who I've been studying, and he's now at Dartmouth College. He was in Montana working in small communities for a long time. But he says, how about if we look at dying as a developmental stage? When you think about it, we're born, and then we have our toddler stage, and then our childhood, then our teenage years, and our adult years, our old age years. And so why don't we see death as just part of this developmental stage, rather than piling on all this other stuff about failure and doing something wrong or being damned, And we have so much namtok. In the Tibetan they call it namtok. This like preconceptions about what's going on. So, I think in order to get through all that, we have to really see what's going on. Tanya, it was you last night, right, who was saying it really had that sense of failure, right? Was that you?
Gina.
Yeah.
Oh, you, okay. Yeah. And I was thinking about that, and there are times when I feel like that in myself too, at different points, like when I'm sick or something's going on. It can very easily slip into a sense of failure, and I think that it's important for us to really examine this condition, so that comment, why not death as a developmental stage, is so much more realistic, honest, and without all the baggage there. So, but I think that we have to continually work on it, because you see in yourself when you start feeling these places of not good enough, or I didn't do it right, or something, and we really struggle with it. So, and I'm sure that the doctors do as well, especially when the patients are totally counting on them. They say, like, I'm from Hawaii, and we have really big waves there. Really big waves. And when you turn around and you see a really big wave coming at you, and the shore is like quite a ways away, the best way to handle the wave is to face it and dive into it, and it's like you just cut through it and the wave folds right over you. But if you try to stop the wave, we have a beach in Hawaii called Pounders for a reason. Yeah, you can feel like your limbs are being torn apart, and just you just don't want to hit the sand as that wave is crashing. So, to see and look at as you approach your big waves in life, how do I face them, and just dive into them so that we can cut through and really swim with them. Sorry. So I'd have to say that death comes to everyone, and it doesn't matter our age or how fit we are, or eating the best food and living in the right place. It's going to come, and there's no place to hide. No place. And we keep trying to stave it off. I think I might as well introduce this one bit here. And these bits of stuff. So here it says, there's no denying it. This was an article that was on the internet. America is getting old. By 2030, the number of Americans older than 65 will have grown by 75% to 69 million, and 20% of the population will be older than 65, right? Compared to 13% today. Yeah, last year I told you, the CEO at our hospital called us the silver tsunami. Right, another big wave. We're really getting there. And so this article was really quite an eye-opener for me. He says, what if aging, at least the physical deterioration that accompany it, was something that could be prevented? It's a lofty idea, but it's one that a new breed of biotech startups and scientists and prominent investors are beginning to tackle. Okay? So you look at how Americans particularly are just so much in denial about aging and death. We're really quite outrageous. So by calculations, the current market for regenerative medicine is about $1.6 billion. But by the year 2025, which is only, 13 years away, they predict that it may be about $20 billion. So revenue generated is going huge, and it says here, politicians are beginning to see the need too, right? So that's juxtaposed by politicians not wanting to face this part of addressing this horrible situation of problems with aging and death. You know, they want to be positive, and they want to think about things being progressive and getting better. So they totally don't talk about this side of aging and death. And so politicians are also looking at regenerative medicine as well. So I just want to say that, you know, it's like I'm weaving in this whole aspect of looking at this text that we're going to be going over with the state of affairs today. So here it says, when we first started this effort, the idea of extending the healthy human lifespan was Ponce de Leon and the fountain of youth. The biggest problem, he says, was that scientists were hesitant to come out and to say that they could do something to cure aging. So he says, now it's no longer a career-ending conversation, it's a fundable conversation, especially in the area of regenerative medicine. So he says, known incidents like paralysis, suffering, and the ravages of aging will be things of the past. So he says, does he say here? Okay, their motto is cure aging or die trying. Okay, so it's just giving you a sense of the denial that we're in about this. Okay, so so even the Buddha said, okay, half of your life is spent sleeping, 10 years in childhood, 20 years in old age, and 20 years in sorrow, complaining, pain, agitation, and physical ailments. So I changed that a little and made that 30 years. Okay, so you can also think of our life as the game of life, a game that we're playing in our life. Okay, so 25 to 35, ages 25 to 35, we start our career, start our families, right? 35 to 45, we develop them and they begin to blossom. And then it's half time, right? 45 to 55, you develop, build, expand, really kind of settle, get those investors in your product, right? 55 to 65, you complete, retire, and hand over. And after that, it's the game is over, right? This is like this is like the working arena. So to really think about how hold it in in this context of the society that we live in and the way people hold this view of aging and death, and the medical model, and even this regenerative medicine, right? And what's truly going on and what we're facing. It's like we're on a raft heading to a cliff, really. So I want to acknowledge you for really taking this weekend to begin to look at this and to know how essential the meditations are to bring what you're hearing and studying into your own experience. And as you sit in the meditations, to really allow it to touch your emotional level, okay? Because we can intellectualize a lot, but it's allowing it to just kind of reverberate through your body and your psyche, so that we can really utilize the time we have, because otherwise we are in denial too. I mean, I have to admit, I am too. You know, I see dying people all the time, but we so easy get into this space of, I've got time, you know, or I'm just going to take it easy. And we need to relax and balance this. So, so we'll work with that this weekend. And I would request you to raise your hand and ask questions at any time, so that we can all kind of keep up with each other. And I have some feedback of, what questions you have, and otherwise we'll be holding that question and we'll have moved on. So anytime things come up, please ask. Tanya.
Interesting all the things that you're saying, because on the other side, what we're hearing a lot is because of the rampant obesity, especially in children, that it's really likely that the current generation of children will not live as long as they.
Yes, right. And we've been in the generation of everything was growing and increasing. We're in the modern age, better cars, better systems, better appliances. Everything was better. It's the generations that we've grown up in. We learned that in grammar school all the way up. And now it's really taking a turn. So, but I also believe that's a developmental stage too. The fact that they're projecting, we reached 7 billion people on the planet now, right? By mid-century, which isn't far, they predict maybe even up to 10 billion. Now, it doesn't look like it here in Newport. But I live in urban LA, and you feel it all around you. You smell it, see it, hear it, it's very urban. So, and also the increasing number of baby boomers too. Dr. Bayok says the current nursing homes as they are now, and if you've been in some, they're pretty scary. The blast of urine hits your nostrils as you walk in. He says they're going to seem like luxury hotels by mid-century. There's so many of us hitting old age. So, pollution, increase of population, obesity, aging population, it's really quite phenomenal as a developmental stage.
And
And I work for the Area Agency on Aging, and I see the statistics that you're predicting or that they're predicting for the number of elders and politicians' denial to face any of this. And it's pretty scary because they're not dealing with the people who are already in their aging years who, A, weren't prepared financially or emotionally. They're separated from their family because they chose to retire someplace else in the country and they have no family around them. They have no resources to rely on. There's so many out there living on $600 Social Security and they're on 10 or 15 medications that eat up most of that money. And nobody's addressing these things. How are we going to go into the future when we don't even have stuff in place now? And then there's no education about health and how to prevent some of it that these people are dealing with. So they're living in homes with no support. The home is falling down around them. It's just very sad, and I don't know how, when we get to be that many more million, the government is going to address any of this. Because they aren't educating people.
Right, right. The physicians, as I was saying last night, have been making so much progress in the area of sustaining our lives and keeping us alive that the support, the infrastructure around it is really lacking. And so these are many of the things that we need to look at as to how we're going to handle our own aging and those loved ones around us, and also in your careers. What can you do in your careers to help others? But I think the infrastructure is where we really need to put a lot of attention, especially in spiritual care too. And things like looking at end of life for ourselves.
Because what we see is a lot of people that don't have family, unlike the video around them, is they go into the hospital and then they're released within days back into a home where there are no supports, no family, no nothing. And then they just go into this vicious cycle where they're constantly back in the hospital for a few days and then back home and back out and back in. And occasionally they go to nursing homes for a few weeks and then they go back home. And it's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. And at end of life, a lot of people don't have tools as what to do. Okay, it looks like the doctors are giving up on me. My family doesn't want to visit me. I don't have any money. How do you deal with it? So this is where refuge and your spiritual practice come in big time. Yeah. And it doesn't matter, I believe, if you're Christian, Muslim, whatever. And trained as a chaplain, I need to really be open to people of all different faiths or of no faith, agnostics, atheists, etc. So, especially as a Buddhist nun, if I were relegated to only Buddhists, I'd be seeing maybe one person every few months, So, as a chaplain, especially for some of the practices that the Buddha and the teachers over the millennia have really shared with us, I really feel like I have some good tools to share to help people end their end of life. And yet, the training as a chaplain is really helpful, very profound in the way of, you don't come in with your bag of tricks and say, here you go, life will be fine. But being receptive to who they are and what their needs are. Everybody's different, people can say they're Christian, but the spectrum of how they hold that and how they practice is huge. Same thing for us as Buddhists or as Muslims. So, so how about if we start this text? Can you hand them out, please? Okay. I wanted to use this text kind of as a backbone for the retreat, and it's called Wishes for Release from the Perilous Straits of the Intermediate State, Hero Releasing from Fright. And it's a text written by the first Panchen Lama. The first he was the tutor of the fifth Dalai Lama in the 17th century. So this is a very traditional Buddhist text. There's a commentary on it by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which is very ecumenical, actually. So it starts off with refuge and really the importance of the Dharma, and also where these teachings take us. But this part of the really facing end of life is very, very helpful. So it's one reason why I wanted to work with this, because now that I've been working with dying people, there's all the states of death, that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had come up with: the denial, the rejection, the anger, the facing it, and what was it? Bargaining and acceptance, yeah. And those are very manifest states. They kind of shift, and different ones manifest at different times. But I'm particularly interested in the point of people in really accepting and working with it, and also what happens at the death stages. So I thought that we could work with some of this too in preparation and for ourselves. Okay, so any questions up to now?
Well, I was just curious about this doctor in Montana, if you have his name.
Yes, his name is Dr. Ira Byock, B-Y-O-C-K. He's written really excellent books. He just came out with a new one called The Best Care Possible. And he's written, let's see, is it Dying Well? And also The Four Things. Yeah.
This one is I worked with a woman who had pretty severe mental illnesses, and she had cancer, and she'd gone through treatment. It wasn't going well, and then she realized she was going to die, and it was incredible. She just told her friends, "I'm going to die, you better come see me right now, because I'm not going to be around much longer." And her mom brought her home. She died at home. And I went out there a couple weeks before she died, and everybody was sitting around the table having a meal. I sat with her family, and she was in the other room. And it was one of the most beautiful things I ever saw. And so, here I thought, here's a woman, with a serious mental illness that was quite skillful people in dying.
That's true. It's so great. How can we have a good death? If we all have to face death, how can we have a good death? And a lot of it is that acceptance and being prepared. how wonderful you got to experience that.
I worked with her for about a year, and watched her get the diagnosis. And she had a pretty profound sense of humor, and somebody said, "Well, you don't have any hair," and she goes, "Idiot, I've got cancer." I mean, she was just right there with it. So it was painful and hard, and I worked with her mom. I mean, Barbara called her, Bessie at 86 decided to bring Barbara home from the assisted living, and, Bessie said, "I'm not a nurse," and Barbara's response was, "Mom, you're the best nurse in the world." And so I was part of this, and her doing the treatment, and it was really a gift. I was supposed to be the caregiver, but I'm not sure who was the teacher.
That happens a lot. It's amazing.
I witnessed the two extremes with my parents. When my mother found out she was terminally ill, she just disconnected the phone call because the doctor had just told her. Stood there for a moment and said, "Well, that's that." Went to her bedroom, and I was still trying to figure out what to say to her. And she called me into the bedroom and she said, "I'm not going to do anything. I don't want them to biopsy to find out what kind of tumor it is because I don't care. I'm not going to do chemo or radiation or special diets." She said, "I've been praying to God to take me for 5 years, and now He's finally going to do it, and I'm going." And that was it. And she came to the acceptance. I think there was a little shock in the moment, and then it was just, and she never wavered on that. And my father, on the other hand, was hours from his death and still saying, "I'm strong and I'm going to fight it," like that one man in the video, and just totally in denial till almost the last minute.
Yeah. This denial part is really challenging because it affects everybody around you. It's like you want to support them, but, what are you going to say? Get off it? It's really hard, yeah.
Well, in the medical profession, would have been denial too, because my mother was on like 15 medications, and I'm looking at them as I'm trying to help her dole them out, because that was quite a chore, and she was finding it overwhelming, because you have to take them at different times and all that kind of stuff. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, "Mom, I don't think you need to be taking all these anymore." She goes, "Well, the doctor wouldn't have prescribed them if I didn't need them." And I said, "Mom, you're terminally ill. You do not need to be taking Fosamax. It's not the thing." So I called the doctor's office and I said, "We want to review these and find out which ones we can stop, and do we need to wean her off, or can we just stop them cold turkey?" And the doctor's office said, "Oh, he wouldn't have prescribed them if she doesn't need them." And I could tell her the same thing. I go, "She's terminally ill. She doesn't need to be on all of these." And so finally I got her to start thinking it through, and she goes, "Oh, okay, well, let me get back to you." But it was just, I had to force her to get her mindset past that belief that they needed all of these medications. It was amazing.
Yeah. So many details to keep our life together, right? So much busyness. It's quite overwhelming. It is overwhelming, right? To keep us all together. And think of all the work that each one of you did to be here in your seat today. And all the things you had to get together in order to have it be okay and that you could be here. So, okay, go ahead.
I was just thinking, I wanted to interject, if you're a cancer survivor, going through chemo and radiation, being told that I only have days to live, I watched my body deteriorate, and as it happened, my body got my feelings for it. When does denial take over or end, and acceptance become the reasonable thing to do at this point? Because I, thought, scratching my way along, so to speak, hoping and praying that these treatments would, help. And I had reached a point where it was on the cusp of, well, I guess this just hasn't quite worked. Well, it was a valiant attempt, and now it's time to go. And things came together that didn't quite happen. But I'm just wondering what you're taking us through. How do we balance the desire to live, if you will, with the realities of, the end game?
Well, it's great that you're here and with us, and that's the beauty of modern medicine too, isn't it? There's an amazing survival rate, and we can live pretty well and long. So there is that part of what do you do when you survive also, right? I mean, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says whether you die or survive, you need to be prepared for either. and on top of that, how do you live it? Because we can live in fear and angst and worry and all this kind of stuff. But, whether we live or don't live, it's like we got to be prepared. And how do we do this dance? And so some of that comes out in here, and really looking at, what is this life supposed to mean, and what am I supposed to do with that anyway? So realizing no matter what, we've got a window of time. I mean, even if we live to 100, maybe those last 20 years will be pretty compromised. So to look at, okay, this time that I have, how am I gonna use it? And that's what I want to work on now. I mean, this weekend. But this prayer at 17 stanzas is also looking at how you face your dying moments, and what do you do with that? Okay, so it's not just clinging to this life alone, but realizing and examining for yourself, what are my perspectives? What is my philosophy about this life? Is this the only one? When my bodily functions don't work anymore, is that it? And really think about it. If that's it, then what? And when people face death, when they believe that there's nothing else after this, there's a particular state of mind also about, it's like, well, why did you work to become a professor or a scientist when it's just done? Okay, so let's get started. So here it's 17 stanzas by the Panchen Lama, and it's all the full scope of preparing for death. It goes through removing unfavorable conditions, working towards accumulating good conditions, and how to engage in your spiritual practice while you're dying. Okay? Considering we're going to face death, how you're going to engage in your spiritual practice while you're dying. I think this is a really big one. And so particularly, from my motivation is for us to work with overcoming our fear of death, and to really utilize the stages of dying. Okay, so stanza 1 is refuge, and particularly thinking about what refuge means. So let's just read the verse. The numbers, the numerals after each verse are either commentary by His Holiness the Dalai Lama or the Panchen Lama as really focus for contemplating those verses. So let's read the first verse together. I and all beings throughout space and without exception go for refuge until the ultimate of enlightenments. To the past, present, and future Buddhas, the doctrine and the spiritual community, may we be released from the frights of this life, the intermediate state, and the next. Okay, so let's see. So here he's the prompts, statements 1 and 2, are looking at how to interpret this. You know, the motivation for your spiritual practice should be for the benefit of all beings. And if you read the Dalai Lama's books, you know, time and again, he'll say, if you're only in it for yourself, it's so limited. You know, you become fearful yourself, you become isolated, you feel really cut off from others. But, you know, especially when you're in a challenging situation, when your motivation is expansive, when you're embracing all that you're doing really with the motivation to benefit of all beings, you have this incredible support around you, and it helps cut through our own fear and isolation. Okay, so what His Holiness says here is, if you're not mindful of the end of life, then you become distracted by the things of this life. So think about it. Well, what is it that really pulls you away from mindfulness of your spiritual practice, regardless if you're Buddhist or any other faith? So he says, impermanent things will hold your attention. His comment is, the profound loses out to the superficial. Yeah? When you don't really focus on having that awareness of end of life, the profound loses to the superficial. So, this is really known, again, we forget and we think that we've got all the time in the world. And I had a moment of recollection yesterday when I was flying here, because the plane went in through a long period of that turbulence, you know, it's going like that, and people are it really helps you think about impermanence. So when is it that it jolts you back into that reality? No, a close call in a car. You know, what are the circumstances that cause you to remember, oh, right, this could happen at any time, not when I'm old. Could happen any time. So, so one time we were flying to India, taking the red eye from Thailand into Bangalore. So it was the red eye. People, there weren't that many people on the flight. People were wanting to stretch out, lie across the seats. No, people were sleeping, and they're handing out the meals. And all of a sudden, we went into a free fall. You know, you're in this kind of bleary, jet-lagged state, and you see bodies flying, hitting the roof, right, and slamming to the chairs. It was so bizarre and so scary. No, but we were okay. but still, you know, I mean, they had to bring ambulances for broken legs, broken arms. It was really, really scary. So by the time it happens, you know, you're just in that moment. So really looking at when death occurs, you know, we need to be ready. We need to be ready. So, you know, they say something like, this kind of stuff always seems like too early until it's too late, right? So essentially what the Dalai Lama is presenting here is, it's important for you to familiarize yourself with your own end of life. Important for you to really think about that and keep that present and in your awareness, so that, you know, when it comes, you're ready to go.
It's coming to mind very strongly. One of the recent very short stories someone told about, you know, they're at that moment, what happens to your mind. So one of the Geshis was sitting in his house and an earthquake happened, and his attendant's the one that told the story. And the whole house is shaking. The attendant runs in and says, Geshe-la, we got to get out of here. And Geshe says, no, we got to take refuge. So it's like, where will our minds be?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's just perfect for this. Yeah. And go for refuge and really think about how at the end of your life, yeah, regardless of the close call, at the end of your life, what is your refuge? Yeah. What do you take refuge in? So refuge is, you know, where do you go for safe protection? Where do you go? When the doctor says, I can't help you anymore. We've come to the end of the trials and medications and surgeries and procedures that I can offer you. What do you take refuge in? That's why for me it was so poignant with all the medical people hovering over him, you know, tell me if you're tired of this. Well, yeah. Tarpa.
Also, that one doctor in the movie who said, I always offer something. She could not, there was no way that she couldn't offer something, you know.
Right.
It was like, it was that thing of death as a failure, because they don't work in that domain. If there was any hope, there was any purpose. It was like, this is the end.
Yeah. And they started out the film by saying, there's always something you can do to sustain them and keep them alive, you know?
Even though the most compassionate thing at that point might be not to.
Yeah.
That's your philosophical view,
Yeah.
right?
Well, look at some of those people in the video.
Absolutely.
Were they being compassionate to that person by keeping them hanging on?
We want a trach if she can't breathe on her own, right?
Right.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
she lived how many years after?
Right.
Or survived?
Yeah. And the main thing, the other comment in there was, we can keep you alive, but what is the quality of your life? Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on medical perspective. Physicians have zero to no training in death and dying.
Oh, I know.
You're trained person, and diagnosing and treating, but it's like, they'll be lucky to have them on doing probably
The question is, when is it going to change?
there's a problem.
It is changing. You know, Dr. Biakis, I believe, I spoke to his sister, who lives near Torrance where I work, and she said that they're planning on opening a whole study unit for this end-of-life work. And yeah.
I would just say, I worked as a nurse for 35 years, and so I'm having some reaction to, all that's being said. And in my experience, just like in any kind of profession, there's all kinds of folks. And I have seen many physicians that are very clear about telling people they're dying and there's nothing else we can offer you, and other than, now, how do you want to die? And let's work with that. But I think the most important thing from my view is that if we have a tendency to hope that whoever is around us when we're dying is going to have that wisdom, we're going to maybe be in bad straits because it may not happen. So I keep coming back to, no matter who is around me, for me to be clear and for me to have the clear plan is the most important thing, that it comes from each of us instead of relying on, some knowledgeable someone in front of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially if we can't hear or see anymore. You really need to go inside and work with the tools that you've gotten and familiarized yourself with. Because we could be very compromised. And so, that's why we need to do the practice. It's up to us. Having the advance directive is really good so that people know what you want, especially like in that one conversation. Well, he told me this and he told me this, right? And the polar opposites. So, if you have an advance directive, some people say that is really, one view is that's inappropriate because you can't know in advance how things are going to be, but in general, you put it down, and so, okay, so this is where the refuge, and the Buddha said too, right? The point too, the Buddhas are teachers. They do not give realization like a gift. You have to practice. And you have to be prepared. What he's saying here is you have to practice morality, concentrated wisdom, and meditation and wisdom on a daily basis. Okay, so morality, really, when you think of it for end of life, if you've been harming and hurting yourself and others all the time, what kind of calm mind might you have at end of life? And a lot of it is, are you loaded with regret, heavy baggage, pain, or is your mind content and clear and open? At the dying states, you want to have that as much mental clarity and freedom to be able to let go. So on one side, this morality is really key to cleaning up your karma so that your mind is free and open and loving and can see better, that you have a better perspective on what is going on. The concentrated meditation really helps you to be able to have a foundation of sticking with it, no matter as fear comes up. It'll say that all these different kind of apparitions may come up, and it's true. I see many times in hospice people have people visiting them who aren't there. They start reaching for things that aren't there. It's very common to see that. And some people are very calm, some people are scared. So, to be able to work with your own concentration so that your mind can settle and say, okay, this is what I've been working on for X number of years, that death is inevitable. And now it's my time. Now that it's my time, what do I do? What do I do now that the stages of death are happening? And if you're familiar with it, you can say, oh, and you recognize the signs. Okay, and then wisdom. Now, the first part of this, the Panchen Lama says obeisance to the Guru Manjushri, and here, Manjushri is the manifestation of the Buddha's wisdom, and His Holiness is saying, the practice of the clear light at death, where you're familiar and work towards really understanding the stages in your consciousness as it dissolves. Now, to work with the clear light state, he says that's all part of the wisdom teachings. So here, it's looking at how do we work with this, the dying states.
In that, could you expand on the last sentence in the first stanza, specifically the intermediate state and the next?
Okay, so we'll be going into it some, but this life is this life current in your physical life now. The intermediate state is, in the Buddhist view, we feel that this life, that your consciousness continues. If you really think about the nature of who we are as a person, we're composed of our body and consciousness, and body and mind, and the body gets old, gets sick, and dies. What happens to consciousness? Yeah, the nature of consciousness is very different than the nature of the body. The body is made up of elements. It's physical. It gets old. It needs repair. The nature of consciousness is of real clarity and knowing. It can apprehend ideas. So you can also imagine where you were and what you were doing when you were 10, like that. You can also imagine being at your front door, turning the key to go in your front door. That's mind doing that. The body can't just go there instantly, but the mind can. You can also imagine what you may be like when you're 80. So the mind has the quality of apprehending and knowing. So they say at the time of death, then the body dies, right? And so there are the dying states of the body, the physical body, and then the dissolution states of consciousness. So they say at death, then the consciousness separates from the body, and because they're more subtle levels of consciousness, then it is what carries forward. And this is more the intermediate state. Okay, this is more the intermediate state where you're in between lives, and that in between state is really a subtle consciousness. So what you're carrying is not necessarily, I like iced mocha, whatever, and I like, I do certain things, or I have the skill of being a fast runner, or whatever it is. But you have what they call bhakcha, which is propensities, more propensities in consciousness, like propensity towards kindness and generosity, of assisting others and looking out for others, or a propensity towards anger or meanness. So they call it bhakcha, which are kind of habitual tendencies. So they say on the very subtle consciousness that you go through these dissolution states at death, and then in rebirth you take another form based on your karma and your accumulation of karma. So it's, it may be unbelievable for some, especially if they're not familiar with it, but it's really something to think about and really look at, well, what happens at death? What happens to consciousness at death? Is it just a chemical reaction in my brain and body that just diffuses and dies out because the body's not functioning anymore, and that's it? Or in the Christian faith, they say that we go to heaven, hell, or purgatory. So to really examine that, what happens and what are the causes and conditions for that? Is it simply that I say, I've been baptized, that's what gets me into heaven? Or what about our conduct all our life? Does that have any meaning at all that would keep me from going to heaven, hell, or purgatory? So yeah, it's really something to examine. So the intermediate state is in between lives. Sometimes they call it bardo, and they say that right now we're in the bardo of our life, right? This is the bardo of our life, and we're like so concretized in this life, so concretized that it really seems like that's all there is. But when you examine that, you think, well, how is it that I was born into that particular family, right? Or I have this kind of body, or these kind of interests. Where did that come from? Why wasn't I born into my best friend's family so I could hang out with them more? Or why did I have those kind of parents instead of, the parents that I really like when I was 10? Now, it's really quite a wonderful study to examine and analyze. Where did this consciousness come from? Where does it go? What happens to it? So that's intermediate state. And then the next. Do we always come back better? Is it always a spiral going up? Next time around, am I going to be really gorgeous and strong and healthy? Yeah.
Is there another word for propensities?
Another word for tendencies? Predisposition? Yeah. A tendency, a predisposition towards generosity. There is again that question of nature and nurture, isn't it? When you have, you're surrounded by really extraordinary family and friends who kind of engender you to cultivate good qualities too. But how come you were born into a family like that rather than someone where they're beating you up and abusing you? Okay. I can see those wheels turning in there.
Then in the intermediate stage, with our consciousness, are we able to make some of these choices? It isn't just totally random that I was born into this particular family, is it? Or is it?
So that's really a good question to chew on. And this is why it's important to examine your conduct now and the idea of cause and effect. Because cause and effect we understand really well on many levels. You know, if we put a fire under the tea kettle, it'll heat up our water for tea. Now, fire burns. Very easy cause and effect there. But what about, you know, ripping off someone because I lost my job and I need to put food on the table for my family? So that becomes a mixed bag, okay? A mixed karma. And stealing is a call a non-virtue, because it's taking what is not ours and taking away things that belong to someone else. But then there's that motivation to really help others. So it's a mixed karma, you know. And it pervades, it hits on so many levels. You know, we can be so irate and angry at these people in big companies getting massive salaries now that were unheard of before. Is that stealing? So this is why we go to refuge, because it's really particularly the real refuge when we think of the Buddha, the doctrine, and the spiritual community. The real refuge is the Dharma or the teachings. So whether you're Christian or Jewish, any faith, you know, you're really looking at the teachings, because what you're holding as the teachings becomes, you know, you adopt as your philosophical view. And hopefully you abide by that in your actions of body, speech, and mind. So it's important to really question and examine what you're taking refuge in. Yeah, Venerable children used to say the American three refuges are the refrigerator, the television, and the shopping center. But the shopping center's kind of gone by the wayside. It's the internet now, right? Yeah. Credit card. Yeah. One second. Go ahead.
How important do you believe, or I shouldn't say it that way, but how important is it that the difference between not knowing or knowing the unknowable is to the acceptance of death with the patients that you've worked with?
How important is the knowable or unknowable?
How important is it to spend this time on perceiving what happens after death when really there isn't a way of knowing? Is that helpful to the people that are in the process of dying? If they have this idea of this is where I'm going next, or is it not helpful to have no clue what happens next?
For the people that I work with, I about never go into that. But I thought, since you people here today are looking at this, you know, we've got a little time. Is anybody here on hospice? You are? Oh, you're a volunteer. Okay, but you're not on hospice. Okay, right. Okay, yeah. Very good. Yeah, this is, you know, it's kind of like, as His Holiness always says, the time to practice is now. Because again, we don't know what's happening tomorrow. And this is the time for you to really question and analyze and check up. What's so? What's so? Do my actions now really have a consequence as to how I die? And what happens after death? So it's important to analyze it. I think now, when people are in hospice, and I am really pretty much bound not to impose my stuff on dying people. It would be really unconscionable. But unless they ask. But I find also that you have to really work with your intuition and choose your words carefully as you work with people, because one word could shut them down. No? I mean, if, for instance, I worked with a family whose mom was dying, 2 sisters and the stepfather, the husband of the person dying. One sister's Jehovah's Witness, and one sister's an atheist. So the atheist says, I don't believe in a creator God. Jehovah's Witness saying, I've been also studying some Buddhist stuff. And then I mentioned, so they're saying, well, what do you Buddhists believe? Is there a creator or no creator? And when I said, there's no creator, it's like it shut down the Father, And so to really, I realized I needed to be careful about how I shared with people, because what you're wanting to do when you're working with clients and their families is to have them be open to their own experience and help them get through some of their fears, and really to support them and encourage them. Wouldn't you say, would you have something to add to that?
What I haven't come up in my situation, when the client asks something, then I'll just very carefully say very little.
Yeah.
Tiny steps.
Right.
And then if the client wants to go one more step, very tiny.
Yeah. Right.
But mostly the focus.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
But do you find that people who have contemplated this or whose spiritual practice, so that they have some sort of belief about what's going to happen to them, if that's strong, then they have a more peaceful death, and the people that don't have a lot more fear?
Yes to the first part, but the second part, some people are okay anyway. It's everybody's different. I mean, some people are very fearful, and when they're very fearful, I'm just trying to help them calm down. When people have focused and are hanging on to their spiritual, like we're going to heaven, I'm going to heaven, then I just kind of support them in that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of back on this question in the way I heard it, that I could be misinterpreting, but some people think certain things are unknowable. These profound things are unknowable. So I'm just thinking we take refuge in it's unknowable, so therefore I don't look at it.
So therefore I don't look at
I
it?
don't look at it because it's unknowable. I can't know about it. It's like a great mystery. So then I just, I don't know, I guess trust in the mystery, which means I don't know, I won't explore, I don't need to, because it's unknowable. I've heard this.
I see.
So I don't know how to deal with that. Is it?
I think there are a lot of people that hold that stance, but I think it, you know, if it's unknowable and therefore I'm not going to examine it, to me it already says I shut the door. And the challenge is when we don't have our body to respond what we've gone through the dying stages, you know, it's something that we just need to kind of examine ourselves and look at, and some of the things are profound beyond what I can comprehend in the teachings, and so I keep kind of opening the opportunity to study with teachers or to examine it or think about it. Yeah. Oh wait, hang on one second. There's.
Well, I was going to also kind of respond to your question and also kind of to your something that you said that ties into this. My understanding, and again, like you, I might be misunderstanding what I've heard, so I kind of wanted a little bit of clarification, but my understanding is that within Tibetan Buddhism, there are very specific teachings about what happens during death, after the bardo, and during the rebirth process, and that the very subtle consciousness is what moves on to the next life. And so your question was, during that transition period, the immediate state, is it all random in terms of what family we're born into or what form we're born into? And from what I've read and heard within teachings is that, you know, we can barely control this growth consciousness. So when it comes to controlling the subtle consciousness, that takes a lot of practice to be able to direct the very subtle consciousness throughout that process. So right now, most people aren't really able to unless you have some pretty profound realizations, although it is possible. So when it comes to the intermediate state, the very subtle consciousness is kind of thrown by the winds of karma, whatever karma was accumulated. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
According to the Tibetan Buddhist teaching?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate.
I've also heard that we just sort of, because of our inability to control the subtle consciousness, we just sort of grasp at the first form that presents itself to us.
Yeah. And there's also the karmic, you know, they call it throwing karma. And so to really watch, to prepare your own mind so that you're not angry or grasping. And yeah, it's harder to control, but again, it's really looking at our priorities and how do you want to use your human life. You know, do you want to become an adept? And there are more and more people opting for that. Really, really working with their meditation practice. And I have friends that have been in retreat for over a dozen years already. And before they started, they went to see His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and they said that they wanted to really make their main focus meditation. They were in their prime, you know. My friend said, I want to use the best part of my life for really accomplishing my meditations. I don't want to wait till I'm retired to do that. I want to use the best part of my life for this. you know. So the Dalai Lama said, "How old are you?" And I forget what it was. He was probably like between 35 and 40 or around there. And His Holiness said, "Good. Because you actually need physical flexibility in your meditations." So, so they went for it. Now they went for it. They've been in retreat for 12 years. Imagine, Westerners. And so it's really looking at how do you want to spend your time, your window of time. Tanya.
You actually just said what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
I think because people ask me, well, what do you say to someone who's dying? And with my father, what he asked me was, what do you Hindus believe? And I said, and being in that kind of traumatized mental state, it took me a while to figure out what he was asking me. Because I was, why is he calling me Hindu? I finally said, oh, you know, he means Buddhist, so it's okay. But what came in my mind was, you know, I couldn't tell him what was in my mind, which was, it's too late to unwrap all this stuff, you know. So that was the first thing I thought. It's too late for you to unwrap this. You know, you're going to die in the next week. And you have so much stuff you've got going. And I wasn't going to say that.
No.
So I said, well, what's the most important thing I could say to him? And so I said, oh, nothing bad is happening. This is the normal way things happen. What's happening to you? Because he didn't have any religion, and so he was one of those, I'm going to fight this, and every day he said, I'm getting up and going to mow the lawn, and all that stuff that he wasn't going to do. And I got to fight this, and I was like, you know, this is normal life. What you're doing now is normal life. This is what happens to people. And just caring for them. That was it. That was all I could do. I couldn't start in with, you know, all the other parts, or how it all fits together, or what's a bardo and all that. That's not that stuff. This is important. What's important was for him to open his heart.
Excellent. That's really where it is. You don't want to engender more fear or angst or feeling of failure, you know? It's like it's handling the situation where they are and really allowing them to rejoice and appreciate the life that they've had, so that their minds are calm and in a good place. You know? And that's what I work a lot with people that are dying. It's just, you know, rejoice in having a wonderful family, or, you know, a good career, whatever it is, because there's always something. And to really help people be calm as they transition out. Mm-hmm.
When my mother was dying, my younger brother came. He had become a fundamentalist, you know, born-again Christian as a teen. And he read to her from his Bible for hours to the point where she was exhausted. And the next day she said to me, why aren't you, you know, telling me all about your Buddhist stuff? And I said, well, Mom, you have your Catholic faith, and I've already talked to you and asked if you wanted any of, you know, if you wanted the priest to come or any of that stuff. I said, I don't need to be messing up your head with stuff that is foreign to you. You need to stay where you're at and go with that. I'm not going to start trying to educate you about something at this point. It just made no sense. And she goes, oh, okay.
Exactly. And even His Holiness says too, you know, stay with your faith. Stay with your faith tradition. It's much better. Yeah. So, I guess we have to stop already, but just one day I'd gone for a second visit to a 98-year-old man who wanted me to say prayers for his wife on hospice. She was 100. And he had a caregiver for him. and he didn't want the male caregiver touching his wife. So he hired a female caregiver to take care of her. And both the caregivers are from the Philippines. You'll find a lot of caregivers from the Philippines. And so he's in a wheelchair, and he's just the cutest thing you'd ever see. He's kind of like something out of Spanky and Our Gang or something, you know. It's like every time I come, the caregiver would part his hair and smooth it over, and he was just so cute. And so he's wheeling in. He says, "Can you please say the 23rd Psalm for my wife?" I said, "Sure." So wheel in, we go around the bed and say the 23rd Psalm and the Lord's Prayer. And then he wants to chat, so we're wheeling back to the living room. And the female caregiver, the hired caregiver, looks at me and goes, "Are you, Jewish?" And I said, "No, I'm actually a Buddhist nun." And she says, "Oh, so you Buddhists say the Lord's Prayer too?" So, you know, I mean, chaplaincy is really, you don't go in with all your bag of tricks. You're there for them. And it's really all about the heart. It's the spirit, it's the heart. Okay, a quick one, we gotta stop.
Oh, this, I work with Frank Kostasevsky, because I don't know if you're familiar with him. But he's
So in Colorado.
He's in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah, I do. The Zen. Yeah, right.
But anyway, he, in one of the retreats I went to, he said, when you're working with somebody, you listen with your head, your heart, and then your body.
Yeah.
And it's like, so you kind of sense at what level they're asking the question or what they're needing. I thought that was pretty.
Yes. Good. Yes. Thank you. Okay.